So they call this bike a beast. And with 145 Newton meters of torque, it ought to slice through traffic like a missile. But something won't let it. Instead, in the city it feels more like a coiled spring, full of potential but restrained. What's going on? Well, let's find out. What a gorgeous motorcycle. This bike looks fast and brutal just standing still. And this is the 2024 KTM 1390 Super Duke Evo. As usual, let's run through some basic specs. Seat height 834mm, weight 212 kilograms wet, engine 1350cc 75-degree V twin, power 190 horsepower at 10,000 rpm, torque as mentioned 145 Newton meters at 8,000 rpm, fuel tank capacity is 17.5 liters, and the bike costs $59,800 before COE and insurance. On paper, this bike should be a dream to ride in the city. It's light, the riding position is comfortable, there's no fairing to trap engine heat, and that torquey engine promises easy city cruising and effortless highway overtakes. The real world, however, can interpret dreams very differently. Now, before we go further, a quick caveat. As usual, this isn't your typical bike review, because we all know how blisteringly fast this bike is. So that's not in question. This review is more about how the beast handles city streets when it's being leashed by traffic lights and speed limits. First impressions, the KTM feels light, and at 212 kilograms wet, it is light. But the seat height is a relatively tall 834mm, and this can make it feel a bit larger when maneuvering slowly. But what makes an Evo an Evo? What separates this from the base model? The difference is that the Evo has semi-active electronic suspension, which means the suspension constantly adapts damping to suit different riding conditions. But more than that, you can also adjust ride height while on the move. A setup like this allows you to quickly soften things for the city and then stiffen things up and raise ride height for high-speed runs, all with a couple of button presses. So it's not just smart technology, it's actually very real-world useful, because the ride quality is genuinely plush. In comfort mode, the suspension really soaks up bumps while keeping the steering razor sharp, and to me this is the real game changer on this bike. The KTM's rider triangle is also spot on. It's slightly forward leaning, sporty but not punishing, and it feels so natural and comfortable. I know I could easily do a long haul trip on this bike, not a problem. The KTM handles like a motorcycle half its size. Tight U-turns, no problem. Medium speed bends. It really feels easy, as if you're on a supermoto. A 1400cc bike shouldn't be this agile, but it is. So no surprises then that navigating multi-story car parks is easy. The Super Duke's low-speed balance is excellent. Despite its size, the bike feels planted and manageable even while crawling along at walking pace. You're not constantly having to dab your foot to stay upright. It turns in quickly, almost eagerly, making tight ramps and sharp turns a non-issue. But that said, this agility can easily get you into trouble, because paired with that engine, this bike is deceptively fast. You twist the throttle and it surges forward, and before you know it, you're well past the speed limit. Usable torque kicks in from about 4,000 rpm, but it really wants to be between 4 and 8,000 rpm. That's its happy place. Lane splitting ability is above average thanks to its narrow profile. The bars are wide enough for leverage, but not wide enough to be a liability. And as long as you're in the right gear, throttle response is instant. Incidentally, KTM is now the last man standing in the super naked class with a V-twin. Everyone else is either on a V4 or an inline 4. So if you want that unmistakable V-twin character, that V-twin vibe, this is your only option. The more time I spend riding in the city, the more I realize what's holding it back. It's not the engine. It's definitely not the height, and not even the heat. It's just the way this bike wants to be ridden. I'll explain. At around 60 km/h in 6th gear, the engine is barely ticking over at 2000 rpm. At that engine speed, the bike really feels half asleep. Even at 80 in 6th gear, it feels like it's only just waking up. To keep this engine responsive and engaged, you really need to be in the lower gears. 3rd around town, 4th on the highway, maybe 5th if the road is clear. And this is where I hit a wall because of how I prefer to ride, which is to stay in one gear, mostly top gear, and let the engine do the heavy lifting. If I don't have to downshift or feather the clutch, I won't. You could call it economy of motion or just laziness. But either way, the Super Duke doesn't do lazy. This bike demands rider involvement, and it wants you to be in the right gear at the right time, keeping the revs in that sweet spot all the time. It wants you to ride, not just coast. And it rewards you for staying active in the saddle. It rewards you for working the gearbox and keeping the engine on the boil. So if you're not riding like that, if you're just ambling along in high gear the way I like to do, waiting for the torque to do all the work, you'll find, as I'm finding, that the riding experience can be quite underwhelming, like the bike is dragging its feet. And that's what's really holding it back in the city. Not the bike, not the engine, just me and the way I ride. The Super Duke doesn't want to be managed, it wants to be unleashed. In traffic, engine heat is manageable, but you do feel it. The fan kicks in quickly and often, which keeps the temperatures reasonable. But this is a 190 horsepower motorcycle. It doesn't like to sit still. It wants to be moving and preferably fast. For this ride, I kept the suspension settings, specifically the damping settings, in comfort mode and ride height at its lowest setting. And overall, I found this combination made the bike feel more stable, more confidence inspiring at low to very low speeds. Even so, the bike is still plenty of fun, just a little less knife-edged. Being able to fine-tune ride height and damping with the press of a button, now that's priceless. No tools, no elbow grease, just a few button presses and you go from a comfortable street bike to a focused track weapon. And I suspect semi-active suspension is going to be the new cruise control. A feature that you don't think you need until you try it, and once you do, there's no going back. At close to 60,000 before COE or insurance, this bike is priced right up there with the best. But for that kind of money, KTM is also throwing in a 4-year unlimited mileage warranty. Yes, 4 years. And if memory serves me well, that's almost 4 years more than what many other brands give you. So after a couple of days on the bike, what's the bottom line?
When I go out the first time with the new engine, with the new bike, I have such a big smiling in my face because you can really feel that the new generation of the beast has so much more torque and low RPMs, and you can feel that. That's a new benefit for the customers.
So on paper, the KTM is a torque monster, but in practice, how and where that torque comes in depends very much on revs and gearing. Because a bike like this has a torque curve and gearing designed to perform between 130 and 230 kilometers an hour. That's its optimal performance range. This is that kind of a bike.
In the beginning, actually, we had a little concerns about this track, that it's too fast. But riding around this track showed us that this track has actually everything. It has fast corners, slow corners, some really technical corners, but also acts straight with a brake point with 260 kilometers per hour and more.
And if you're riding in a city and your speed is between 60 and 90, you can see how easy it is to be riding out of that optimal range. Again, this is not a quality inherent to the KTM. It is the nature of high-performance V-twins. They work very well within a specific operating window, but when you get them out of this operating window, then the performance can be a bit disappointing. For me personally, riding in the city, I prefer something a bit less frantic, a bit more tractable. Of course, I do understand that some riders prefer a more intense, hands-on riding experience. I know a buddy of mine who used to say that every time he puts his helmet on, he feels like he's going to war. It feels like he's preparing for battle. And in a sense, I can relate to that. Riding in the city can be dangerous. And if that's what's important in a bike for city riding, then yes, you will be definitely very happy with the Super Duke as your battle companion. And like a warhorse, it wants to charge. Once it gets moving, it really gets going. And this also means you need to exercise a lot of restraint, because something like this can blow by the speed limit very easily, very quickly, without you even knowing. It's still very much a beast. The character and nature of that high-performance big bore V-twin also does require you ride it a certain way. And if that's how you like to ride, hovering in third or fourth, keeping the revs high and the throttle ready to pounce, you will absolutely love commuting on this missile. But for the rest of us, maybe the beast is better left in its natural habitat, terrorizing mountain roads and racetracks instead of inching past coffee shops at 30 km/h. Right, that's it from me today. See you in the next video.